FAQ page on our website, but we are happy to receive new inquiries. Since I'm new and they are the true experts, there may not be much that I can contribute as a panelist, but I appreciate the opportunity to welcome you, introduce myself, and explain the plans for the town hall. Without further ado, Aisha.
Thank you so much, Kate. Good morning, everyone. My name is Aisha Green from the Office of Scholarships and Student Aid. I'd just like to extend another welcome from our office. I know that there have been many questions and concerns and unknowns about the changes coming to the student payments. And so our goal today is hopefully to help answer some of those questions and ease some of your concerns about the changes that are coming in August. This is our discussion topics for this morning. We'll discuss why these changes are being made and of course what's changing. We will also discuss the new payment process for some of the student payments, as well as any things that you need to be aware of because of these changes. It is our goal to provide you with as many resources as possible to help you navigate through these changes. And then lastly, we'll have time for any questions and answers that you still have. So let's get into it. What's changing and why? Before we go directly into what's changing and why, I do think it's important to give you all an update, or at least the background about what we have called the Student Payment Project. This project actually started many, many years ago. In 2019, a group of staff at the university from the Office of Scholarships and Student Aid, the graduate school, accounts payable, HR finance, we all got together and took a comprehensive look at how student payments were being made at the university. And what we found were some inconsistencies and unclear policy on how payments should be made to students. Out of that, we knew that there was a need to define and document clear policy on how to manage student payments. We set some really clear goals, which was to define and document information about student payments, of course, ensure the university is compliant with any federal or state guidelines. If we knew about any errors in processing payments, that we tried really, really hard to correct those. And most importantly, communicate all of these changes to campus and to students. Having said that, let's talk about what's changing. Beginning August 2021, all payments to students are considered financial aid. This is going to include your training grants, your fellowships, your research awards, travel awards, internship awards, scholarship grants, tuition and fee payments. Any monies paid to students that's basically not compensation for employment is financial aid. Again, I just mentioned a few moments ago, there are basically two exceptions. One exception is employment compensation. So this would fall into the category of our teaching and our research assistants. And also reimbursement or expenses for things that benefit the university or that primarily benefit the university. So for example, if a student is traveling with their academic department to a recruiting event to help recruit students to the university, and they want to be reimbursed for their gas mileage or their travel expenses, that's not considered financial aid. Or if a student is paying out of their own pocket for office supplies for their academic department and their academic department chooses to reimburse them, that is not considered financial aid. All other payments made to either benefit the students' educational expenses while they're enrolled at UNC, or payments being made to students because they are enrolled at UNC are considered financial aid. So why are these changes being made? I think the most important reason is to ensure that the university is compliant with federal and state regulations. If the university is not compliant, nobody wins. If the university is at risk, students don't win, faculty doesn't win, staff does not win. So we want to ensure that the university is compliant. The Department of Education is very, very clear on what the definition of financial aid is, specifically any payment made to a student because of enrollment in a post-secondary education, in a post-secondary institution, or to cover expenses related to enrollment at a post-secondary education institution is financial aid. Again, exceptions to that would be compensation from employment earnings. Also, all financial aid that a student receives must be coordinated with any other aid that the student is getting. The university signs what's called a program participation agreement with the Department of Education, and it basically says that the university is responsible and capable of collecting all student payments and making sure that students aren't receiving in excess of financial aid. This is very, very important for students who are receiving financial aid from the Office of Scholarships and Student Aid, for example, loans. If students are receiving financial aid through the Office of Scholarships and Student Aid, the total aid that they receive, in addition to any other departmental funding or external sources or funding from external sources, cannot exceed what the cost of attendance is for the academic year. And we'll talk certainly more about that as we move forward into the presentation. But I do want to be very, very clear on what the cost of attendance is and how it is applicable to students who are applying and have received or are receiving financial aid through the Office of Scholarships and Student Aid. So the cost of attendance is simply a reasonable budget of education-related expenses for the student while they're enrolled. It makes allowances for, of course, tuition and fees, books and supplies, housing and food, health insurance, minimal travel expenses, a base miscellaneous expense, and loan fees if students are accepting student loans. Again, for students who are receiving financial aid through the Office of Scholarships and Student Aid, their total aid in combination with any other departmental funding that they receive cannot exceed what the cost of attendance is. And I've shown you an example here on your screen to the right of the screen. All right, let's jump into payment processes and any things that you need to be aware of because of these new payment processes. Distinguishing between if your payment is financial aid or if it is compensation from work is going to be key in determining your payment method and the frequency of your payment. The Graduate and Professional Student Government did a wonderful job in putting together this chart to help guide students in terms of deciphering if their payment is financial aid or if it's compensation from work. And just to reiterate, compensation from work is going to be your teaching and your research assistantships, whereas financial aid payments are going to be your training grants, your fellowships, research awards, internship awards, scholarship grants, tuition and fee awards, those type of things that aren't necessarily income from work. For financial aid payments, the payment platform is going to be GradStar. Your department will use GradStar to report your payments to the university, and your payments will move from monthly to semesterly. Let's talk a little bit about GradStar though, just so we're very, very clear on what GradStar is. GradStar is simply the platform used in Connect, Carolina for academic departments to report and for the financial aid office to collect any sort of payment that is being provided to students because of their enrollment at the university. Your department will have the responsibility to enter any sort of payment or any sort of award that you are receiving into GradStar. Once that payment is entered into GradStar, the earliest date that you could expect what I call a refund, what you may call a paycheck, is the first day of classes each semester or term of enrollment. I've identified some dates here for you on the screen, and they represent the first day of class of each semester in this current academic year. And again, it's just the earliest date that you could expect a payment for your specific award that you're receiving from your academic department, or even an external award if they have to enter it in GradStar. It's very, very important to note that your academic department or graduate department does need to enter the payment in GradStar before you can receive a payment. I don't want anyone to leave today's session thinking that the dates I've listed here are the exact payment dates, because if your graduate department or academic department perhaps enters your award in GradStar in September, then that's when the earliest that you'll receive your payment. So I want to be very, very clear on that. This is just a visual representation of what I just mentioned. I think it's, at least for me, important to have a visual representation in addition to just speaking about what the changes are going to be. And I'll just go through the flow chart with you here. In this, on the left-hand side, once the academic department enters your award or payment into GradStar, and again, this is for payments classified as financial aid, it is automatically sent to the financial aid office for review. And once that payment gets to the financial aid office for review, our office will do one of two things. We will compare what your payment is to determine if you have any existing financial aid. If you haven't applied for financial aid through the financial aid office, or if you have applied for financial aid through the financial aid office and the addition of your departmental award does not cause an over award, meaning that your total aid is not over the cost of attendance, we will send that payment to the cashier's office, and the cashier's office will then apply it to your bill if needed, or issue the appropriate electronic refund. So that's one step of the process. And all of this happens electronically. It's not necessarily a manual review. It's all done electronically. If you'll go back to the little pink square on the left side of your screen, in that auto check, if a student has applied for financial aid through the financial aid office and the addition of their departmental award from GradStar causes an over award such that the financial aid that they're receiving from our office, such as loans, in addition to whatever payment that they're getting through GradStar, if that exceeds the cost of attendance, that payment is stopped immediately. Our office will then review the financial aid that we, the Office of Scholarships and Student Aid, has offered the student, make any unnecessary adjustments or reductions to the financial aid that we have offered the student, not your departmental funding, but the financial aid such as loans that our office has offered the student, and then send all the payments to the cashier's office for them to either apply the payment to your bill or issue the applicable refund. So that's just a visual of how that works. All right, let's talk about some of the things that you should be aware of because of these changes. And we have mentioned the payments moving from monthly to semesterly many times, but I always think it's good to give as many examples of what that looks like as possible. So that is one of the biggest things that you should be aware of for students who are now having a payment that is classified as financial aid. Again, this is going to include your tuition grants, your fellowships, your research awards, your internship awards, any sort of award that's not employment earnings. So let's just say, for an example, in the case of a training grant, if the value of a training grant is $30,000 and you're curious on what your payment schedule might look like, this is an example of what it might look like. You may receive a $12,000 payment for the fall semester beginning in August, and that would be your amount to use for your expenses for the months of August through December. In January, you may receive another $12,000 payment for your expenses from January to May. And then in the summer term, you will receive $6,000 for your expenses for the months of June and July. I want to be very, very clear that this is just an example of what a payment schedule could look like. You are strongly encouraged to contact your academic or graduate department for what exact payment schedules may look like. As I mentioned before, another thing that you should be aware of, especially for students who are applying and have received financial aid through the Office of Scholarships and Student Aid, I have abbreviated that on our slide as OSSA. So when you see OSSA, it means Office of Scholarships and Student Aid. For students who are receiving financial aid through OSSA, our office may need to reduce or adjust aid we initially offered you, such that your total aid in combination with any of the departmental funding or GradStar award you are receiving does not exceed the cost of attendance. And this is an example of what a revision would look like for students in that case. So if we'll focus on the square to the left side of your screen where it says financial aid before receiving a training grant, and training grant is just the award type that I'm using to illustrate an example. It really could be any type of funding. So let's just say a student before receiving a training grant accepted a loan offer from the Office of Scholarships and Student Aid. And the loan offer they accepted was up to the cost of attendance for the academic year. And then let's say a month or two later, they were notified, oh, I'm getting a training grant that's valued at $20,000. Once the academic department reported the training grant in GradStar, that information would automatically be sent to the cashier's office, and not the cashier's office, the financial aid office or the student aid office, and our office would then make a reduction to the loans that we initially offered the student, such that the total aid displayed on the right side of your screen does not exceed the cost of attendance. And you can see the difference when you look at the financial aid offer before and the financial aid offer after receiving the training grant. The total amount of financial aid is still the same, only the type of aid is changing. So that's an example of what a potential revision might look like if our office needs to make an adjustment to student loans. All right, the taxability of financial aid. I know that this is a question that came in a lot from the survey and a lot just through our office and other platforms. For students who are now receiving a financial aid payment, again, this is going to include your fellowships, your training grants, research awards, travel awards, contest or prizes or participation awards that's open for students only. The value of those awards will now be reported on a 1098-T form rather than as taxable income on a 1099 or W-2 form. The 1098-T form simply helps students determine if they can claim a tax deduction or if they qualify for one of the education tax credits on their federal tax return. I'm going to give a disclaimer here because I want to be very clear in my next statement. Tax liability is different for each individual. I cannot provide specific information for your tax situation. It's going to be very, very important that you consult with a qualified tax professional or the IRS concerning the taxability of financial aid as it relates to you. I do not want anyone thinking that I'm giving out tax advice because I'm not a qualified tax professional. So I just want to make that disclaimer. Having said that, though, financial aid may be taxable if the sum of aid you receive exceeds your qualified tuition and fee expenses. The IRS defines qualified tuition and fee expenses as tuition and fees required for enrollment at the institution or at UNC, or for books, supplies, and equipment required for course instruction, and those books, supplies, and equipment are required for all students in that same course of instruction. Again, I cannot speak to your specific tax situation because I am not a tax professional. You are strongly encouraged to contact the IRS or a qualified tax professional to determine how financial aid taxability is going to affect you. And we'll have some resources for you at the end of the presentation. Okay, I am going to turn it over to my colleague, Ms. Beverly Warwick, to talk about some frequently asked questions and resources.
Thanks, Aisha. Got a few questions in the live chat, but I'll go ahead and go through our presentation first. These were collected from some of the questions that were submitted earlier by students. Also, some questions that we've been getting from departments and students individually. So the first thing I think is the biggest sort of thing to make sure that you all know, which hopefully you do by now, is that your teaching and research assistantship payments are not changing. And if you are paid that way, hired for compensation for work and you're an employee, then you will still be paid in the same way that you were before. It is not financial aid. And you'll still be paid monthly through payroll. You'll receive the W-2 at the end of the tax year as you normally would. Please note also that tuition and fee amounts that were paid on your behalf because you have that TARA position are financial aid, and that has always been counted in the past. So that's not a change that is happening in August. That will continue just to be as normal. So if you're receiving a training grant, why is this now considered financial aid? Well, the team that looked at this, the project and all of the student payments really dived into the definition of training grants, considered, we consulted our colleagues in Office of Sponsor Research and looked at other universities, consulted them as well to see how they're treating training grants, and found that they really are considered financial aid because they're not compensation for work performed in the same way that your TARA is. There's no effort reporting associated with training grants. The training grant is really to train a student in a specific area. I mean, it primarily benefits the student and your education. So that's why it's considered financial aid. This question is pretty popular too. A lot of students have been concerned about getting proof or documentation about the funding. How will it affect your ability to finance purchases or secure loans or a mortgage? And students who receive funding from from financial aid should ask their department student services manager or your contact, whoever you work with in your department the most, for official documentation of training, grant, fellowship, or scholarship amounts. They have the authority, staff in those areas have the authority to provide this documentation on request. And the graduate school provides it for the fellowships that we administer, but we do that for our fellowships. Each other department, any other department would be able to do the same thing. So that's something we've done always and will continue to do to provide that documentation for you. Can GradStar and financial aid payments be made monthly instead of by semester? So GradStar is aligned to disperse the payments as financial aid through the OSSA disbursement system, and their disbursement system currently disperses on a semester basis. We have looked into this question quite thoroughly, and it still is on our list for continuing to look into technical or other. It's not only technical, but other concerns that we have. But we are continuing to study this question to see if that is a possibility in our phase 2 or later of this project. We do have a phase 2. This is a phase 1. And we do have a phase 2 list already. And this is one that's on that list for sure. I can't make any promises about that, but it is something that we are continuing to research. And but for the moment, we don't have the ability to disperse monthly through financial aid. So taxes, Aisha has mentioned taxes a bit in some of the slides earlier, and I just want to restate that tax liability is different for everyone. It is really difficult for us to say exactly how much your taxable income would be because everyone has an individual situation. So you need to look at your tax forms that the university provides and then consult with the IRS or a qualified tax professional. As Aisha stated, financial aid recipients, some of your aid may be taxable if it exceeds the qualified tuition and related expenses. And so you will need to decide that for yourself. Employment compensation paid through payroll is taxable income, as it always has been. You file your W-4 and NC-4 with your HR rep when they hire you, and you receive a W-2 at the end of the year. Withholding is held from those payroll payments. We have been asked before if withholding can be held from financial aid, but that also is not possible due to federal guidelines. The IRS will not allow the university to do that, withhold from financial aid. primarily because there's not a standard rate of withholding. Because of that differences in tax liability and the amount that should be taxed or could be taxed. We don't have a standard rate that we could apply in the same way we do for compensation.
I think this is one that I need to take care of. Let me just move my little mouse a little bit so I can see. Okay, I'm receiving a research award. Does it affect the cost of attendance cap on financial aid? Research awards will be considered a financial aid payment, as we've discussed throughout this presentation, specifically for students who have applied and are receiving financial aid through the Office of Scholarships and Student Aid. If your travel expenses are directly related to your educational requirements for your degree program, we can make a cost of attendance adjustment to allow for the amount of your travel expense so that your other aid from the financial aid office is not reduced. We'll have a form on our website that we can send you if you request it, but that is an option. We definitely don't want to take away money from the aid that we have offered you if your research award is earmarked for research expenses. Let's see. Here we go. How do I know if I'm receiving financial aid up to the cost of attendance, or COA as I have listed here? For students who have applied for financial aid through the Office of Scholarships and Student Aid by completing a free application for federal student aid, or FAFSA, our office will send you a financial aid offer that is displayed in Connect Carolina. You simply need to review that financial aid offer. The cost of attendance is displayed on the financial aid offer, as well as the total aid that we have offered you. You compare the two, and if they equal each other, then that's how you know you've been offered aid up to the cost of attendance. This is a question that our office has gotten a lot. Will my departmental funding award, training grant, or payment be reduced since it now counts as financial aid? Our office, the Office of Scholarships and Student Aid, will not make any reductions to the amount of what I always call departmental funding that you're getting from your department. And again, this includes your training grants, your fellowships, your research awards, your travel awards, etc. However, a reduction to the financial aid that we have offered you, such as loans, may be needed such that we remain compliant with federal guidelines. We have developed a really cool calculator to help students and departments and whoever else is interested determine what their financial aid eligibility would be with the financial aid office if they're receiving a departmental payment. And I'll just go through that calculator with you. Let's see if I can get it to work. Okay. So this particular calculator is located directly on the financial aid website. And again, we'll provide the resources and links afterwards. And it's really, really simple to use. Once you are on the calculator, you simply type in your cost of attendance for the academic year, the amount of your departmental funding or student award payment, and then the difference is automatically calculated in terms of what your remaining aid eligibility would be with our office. So this is a question that we get a lot. And again, we want to have as many resources where you can kind of get the answers quickly. And this calculator is definitely one of the things that will help you do that. All right. I started the calculator again. 1 second, guys. Let's see if I can get to the next slide. Here we go. Do I need to complete a new direct deposit form since my training grant, fellowship, scholarship, departmental award, travel award, research award, etc. now counts as financial aid? The University Cashier's Office does have a electronic refund process that is separate from the compensation from work direct deposit process. So it is important that you ensure that you are signed up for an electronic refund with the University Cashier's Office. That can be done directly on Connect Carolina. And I've listed the steps here for you, but yes, you do need to make sure that you're signed up for an electronic refund with the University Cashier's Office. All right, Beverly, I'll send it back to you for the resources.
Okay. Let's see. We have created a table that lists all the different types of payments that your department could potentially provide to you, from employment compensation through all the different types of awards that are financial aid, and other things. So you can find that table on our website. I think it also is really helpful because it tells you what counts as financial aid and what does not, the payment process that will be used, how it will impact your student account. Some things pay your charges automatically, some things are refunded to you directly, and then notes about your taxes and the forms that you would be receiving. So please check that out as a resource.
My computer doesn't want to do what I needed to do. There we go.
This, I think Aisha just went over, and so for OSSA, they have a lot of tools and information there. So please visit their website and look for the calculator, the FAQs, more about the cost of attendance, which Aisha, you might need to confirm this, but it is adjusted every year or looked at every year, the cost of attendance. Is that correct?
Yes. Yep, the Office of Scholarships and Student Aid reviews the cost of attendance every year. Naturally, as tuition and fees increases, the cost of attendance.
That's right.
And then also with living expenses, as living expenses around the area change, that could fluctuate the cost of attendance as well, but it is reviewed annually.
Right. So the GPSG has also provided some information on their website. The table that Aisha used earlier in the presentation was taken from this information. So visit that site as well. And I saw someone ask for us to put some of those links in the chat. So I will try to do that as we move along. And then we have some additional resources. We do have a student organization out of the law school, the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program, or VITA. I know they book up their appointments pretty quickly when tax season rolls around, and they're not particularly active during the non-tax season year, but there is a contact name that you can reach out to and during the year to get in touch with if you have questions. But I would suggest you look into that program. The more information about the 1098, what is reported, specifically more about the qualified expenses and more descriptions about that are on the cashier's office website as well. Topic 421 is really good from the IRS. IRS publications are not typically the easiest to read, I will admit that, but 421 is actually pretty easy to read and understand in layman's terms. So publication 970 is also helpful. I would probably go to 421 first, and then if you have further questions, read 970 before you reach out to the IRS directly. Also, the Dean of Students already has some financial literacy and budgeting information on their website. So you can go and check that out. They have different workshops that are hosted during the year as well. The graduate school also is working in this area. We hope to have some more workshops available during the fall semester or during this academic year to work on increasing our workshops in this area. And I think if you still have questions, I first ask you to reach out to your department, and primarily your department is going to make the decision on and they reach out to us quite frequently, and they ask us, if they have a question about the type of funding, but they're going to make the decision on how they process your funding, how they decide what category your funding is. And so I would reach out to them if you have any questions. If you need documentation, you should have an appointment letter from your department or some type of award letter that would explain your funding. And from that, if they have questions, they can reach out to us. We are sharing all of our information with them. We have multiple trainings and other webinars set up with your department. So they're getting the same information and more, because they're getting more about the actual GradStar system and all of the details. So they are well equipped to answer questions. And if they're not, you can definitely always, or you can't find someone at the moment, and you have an urgent question, please reach out to us. You'll see the emails there, GradStar, OSSA's email, and the cashier's office. So be sure to use those emails, as there are usually more than one person looking at those email accounts, so we can get back to you quicker than if you email us individually. But please do reach out. We're happy to talk with you at any time.
All right, I think at this point, we can probably just answer questions that others may have. I'm not sure if someone wants to facilitate that, or if we just unmute, or how would you like to handle it, GPSG?
Yeah, I think if someone, I don't know exactly how to have someone unmute if they can, but I'm welcome to do that. You can also type in the Q&A and I can ask those questions. So someone asked, where will this meeting recording be posted? Oh, someone just answered that. Yeah, maybe just, there's another question about it. Where will this be meeting recording be available?
We can plan to have the recording available on the graduate school's website. I'm not sure if you would also like to post it on GPSG. You're happy. I mean, I'm happy for you to do that. But yeah, we'll definitely have all of our resources on the graduate school website.
And Chad, to allow someone to talk, if any of our attendees would use the raise hand feature, I can change the settings to allow them to talk. We may not be able to see your video and it takes some working, but that would be the way to do it.
Awesome, thanks.
See, there's a question in the chat. The 1098T is not reported to the IRS, and that is correct. That form is only provided to the student through your student account. It is not reported to the IRS. I don't know, I answered, I think all of the questions in the Q&A and the chat are answered. So I will leave it up to you all as to how you want to proceed.
Yeah, I just have one comment. I know we are way ahead of schedule. I definitely urge anyone that has questions, please don't feel like uncomfortable to ask. It's very rare that probably Beverly and I get on the same space at the same time talking to a group of students. I don't think that it has happened in a very, very long time.
Mm-hmm.
Please don't feel like intimidated or scared or anxious to ask. I can guarantee you the question that you have, someone else has it. And it's just not asking. So before we, close the session, I just encourage anyone to please feel free to ask as many questions as you can. We are here for you. We want to support you. We don't want anyone leaving today saying that my question wasn't answered and you just didn't ask.
And I definitely echo that, Aisha. There is a question in the chat about travel reimbursements. I do want to caution a bit. There was another question earlier about using the word reimbursement. So your department may refer to your travel award as a reimbursement because they're paying it after you return from your trip. That is not the same thing as a reimbursement because you're doing university business. So be careful about the terms that you're hearing. Stipend, for example, is used for all kinds of things. Some faculty especially use the word stipend to refer to HR payroll actions, to your assistantships appointments. But stipend in other cases is used to describe your training grant. So whatever the term is, the important thing is the purpose of you receiving your funding. Why are you receiving this funding? Is it because you're a student and you're attending the university? This is whatever your activity is to required by your program or will benefit you academically. And all of those things need to be considered when deciding, what type of funding you're receiving and how it will be processed. But anyway, getting back to the question, the school that said our school processes a lot of student travel reimbursements primarily for student organizations, and they travel throughout the year. We've been using P cards for their travel expenses. Will P card be discontinued? Yes, P card, you will not be able to use P cards as a department to pay travel that should be counted as financial aid. The only way it has to be paid as financial aid, so it has to be paid through GradStar. Students don't have to wait once a semester to get their travel award through GradStar. The dates that Aisha mentioned at the beginning of the session, the earliest that a student can receive funding is the beginning of the semester. But if you travel, say in October, a department can process an award in GradStar October 15th, and you may receive it October 20th, for example. You will receive it a few days or up to about a week after it's processed in GradStar. So those payments can be made. It's just there are processes that go on behind the scenes. Aisha's office will need to make sure that you're not getting an over award. If you've got financial aid, the cashier's office has to apply or not apply to your student account, and then refunds are issued. So that's why it's really important that we're not using P cards if this is a travel award for a student's academic benefit. That must be done in GradStar.
So Beverly, I know we have lots of questions coming in through the Q&A. Julianne Davis has her hand raised. So Julianne, you should be able to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I am curious about definitions of work versus individual academic benefit. I think for some of us going to do research, field work, we kind of define as work, but it sounds like our definitions with our departments might not match university definitions. And then I think it was mentioned that, our departments might also have some say in how things are defined. So I'm just wondering if there could be a bit more clarification on if the university or departments define work versus academic benefit. Thanks.
Aisha, do you want to take this one?
I was
can
just
take it
going
if you
to,
want to. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
you can certainly, I guess, comment on my comment, maybe.
Okay.
The only thing that I was going to say, unless it is official employment with the university, if you're being funded to do research, I don't necessarily consider that employment versus is if you're on contract work for the university and it's considered employment, because if you don't do the research, you can't receive the fund. Is that correct? And is that correct, Julianne?
Yes, it is. So some of these, this financial compensation is for doing research. And probably didn't use compensation correctly there, but
Yeah.
the lingo.
Yeah, I personally would not define it as employment. In my mind, it's almost like you're getting a scholarship to go travel and do your research, rather than you're required to go in a specific day from 8 to 5 or from 10 to 4 or from 10 to 2, to do, your specific job duties. That's how I classify it. If that makes sense. I don't know if anyone else wants to chime in.
Generally, compensation or work, employment does, and it is difficult to separate those two, but generally, what you consider work versus what the university or what regulations consider work, because it all can get a bit blurry. But basically, you have an expectation of certain hour numbers per week. You have effort reporting if you're on a grant. You have an expectation from your supervisor. You could be terminated, for example. You could be asked to work 10 hours a week or 15 hours a week. Those are attributes really of compensation, where there's a different relationship. If you apply for a travel award to go do research, your department may give that to you. They may even give it to you through a grant or a state fund or a trust fund. It doesn't really matter where you're getting it from. But if it's for something that is different than the work situation, then it's financial aid. And I'm not saying that departments have the authority to say, okay, we're going to say this is work, and really it's not. No, that's not the situation. They don't have that level of discretion. We're training them, and we're giving them as much definitions and guidance that we can, so that they make those accurate decisions. But what I'm saying is they have that information to do it. Like, I don't have all the information when I said has some, you can make the decision. It's because they have the information of what kind of work, what type of appointment you have, all those details to make that determination as to whether it is compensation for services versus financial aid.
Thank you both. I've got Alexis Dennis, and I am going to allow to talk. Alexis, you should be able to unmute and ask your question now.
Hi, thank you. I have a follow-up question from the last one, because I guess to me, like the requirements of my PhD program to graduate are that I, take classes, take my comprehensive exams, and write a dissertation. And so the other stuff that I do as a doctoral student, like research, going to conferences, that's for me to get a job. And a lot of times doing that work, I'm furthering the mission of the university by doing that. And so I don't, like my first conference I ever went to, I considered that a training opportunity. Beyond that, I just consider it work. And so I guess what I'm really concerned about is, given that students go to several conferences a year, if we are being like, it's one thing to me if a travel award is given, that so I never have to take any money out of the stipend that I'm living off of, because that's additional money. But it feels odd to me that reimbursements, when I'm having to pay for stuff up front, and essentially my stipend is not increasing, that will then also be counted as financial aid, because it's going to look like I was taxed on a much higher income than I actually was earned and was living off of.
What I'll say, and again, with taxability, I really think it's important for students to make sure they consult with the qualified tax professional, but specifically as it relates to like travel for conferences and professional development and things like that, the Department of Education is very clear. If the award is being paid to you solely because of your enrollment as a student, it's financial aid. It would be different if your department said, okay, I'm giving a conference, travel award to any person, faculty, staff, students, anyone in the general public who wants to travel for professional development, right? That would be something different. That wouldn't be considered financial aid. But if your department is giving the award to you, and I'm just saying the base definition of financial aid, because you are a student enrolled at UNC, or it's not one or the other, or it is one or the other, or to help cover your educational expenses, then it's financial aid. So yes, this award to go to a conference might not cover your tuition and fees, right? But the award is given to you because you are a student at UNC, which is, according to the Department of Education, the definition of financial aid, which then requires the financial aid office to count it as such. So if your department wants to open, if your department wants to open that professional development for where students can get money for conferences to the general public, where it's not student specific, then it wouldn't be counted as financial aid. Otherwise, if they're saying only students can get this award for professional development, according to the Department of Education rules and guidelines, it's financial aid.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Beverly, are there any questions that have been asked in the Q&A that you'd like to share, like that could be applicable to others hearing? I know we have some people joining by phone or streaming in that can't see the Q&A.
Let's see. There were a couple of questions about being hired outside your academic department. For example, as at the writing center or an administrative office, if you're being hired, and is that still income rather than financial aid? And the answer I've replied to was yes. If you're being hired to work a certain number of hours to do a specific job, it doesn't matter if it's for your academic program or another office on campus. That work is still considered work. That was asked a couple of different times, I think. External sources, that's come up a couple of times, not today necessarily, but in other conversations. And if the external source is actually running, through UNC-Chapel Hill, then your department would be paying that through our systems. And so it would be considered, they would process it as financial aid if it was supposed to be processed that way. And Aisha, you can talk about the reporting if students are receive direct funding from an external source not coming through UNC and what they're supposed to do in that case.
Yeah, you're still required to report it to our office according to the Department of Education guidelines on our financial aid website, studentaid.unc.edu. Beverly, if you can type that in the chat for me, it would be great. We actually have an outside scholarship award reporting form that students are supposed to use to report any sort of scholarship or awards they're receiving from donors outside of the university to the financial aid office so that we can make sure it's included in the financial aid offer. That is the answer to that question. We hope that students, do that, but of course, if you don't report it, I'm gonna make another comment.
Let's see. Are there any more open questions? There is a question about a tuition billing question. If you are receiving a training grant from the school, we usually get distributed and then you would pay the difference, or would we receive the full tuition payment and it wouldn't include our grant and we would get that deposited and make it part of our payment? If your school or your department is paying your stipend, your training and the tuition related to that, then it would all get posted to your account, assuming they pay it at the same time. There doesn't have to be a difference in how you receive that. You would receive that actually the same way. They would pay the stipend and tuition and the fees if that was included, and it would apply to your student account. Another question about their financial aid income was the documentation from UNC rejected by all mortgage lenders when trying to buy a house unpaid from a department and fellowship. Will the new official documentation be accepted by lenders? There's not new official documentation. I wasn't aware that documentation was rejected by mortgage lenders. So I'm not 100% sure how to answer that question. We can go back and try to find some more information out. And maybe this attendee could let us know some more details. I've not had that feedback before, but I'm happy to try to find an answer to that question. I think that's all that we have in the Q&A and all in the chat, unless I'm missing something. Any other, I guess, final questions? We're about 3 minutes till time. Well, Chad, I guess we'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thanks. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
So yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone again for taking the time today to come to the town hall to discuss some of the concerns and questions that a lot of students still have. We wanted to just highlight again a lot of the links that were shared in the chat, so like the FAQ page and resources that the graduate school has made available to us. As we mentioned, if you still have any additional remaining questions, please reach out to either your student services manager, student business manager, or your director of graduate studies, as well as the Office of Scholarships and Student Aid to get any additional clarifications. And I would like to thank again our panelists, Aisha Green, Beverly Wyrick, and Dean McAnulty for taking their time to both prepare answers to questions as well as being here to answer the questions we have. And we hope that you have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.